General Hospital spoilers reveal that Wiley had always clung to the belief that family meant safety. That the people who tucked him in at night and whispered promises of forever would never be the ones to shatter his fragile sense of reality. But everything changed the moment he heard the hushed, frantic voices of adults echoing down the halls of the Quartermain mansion, voices that carried the unthinkable truth: Daisy had been taken. And the person behind her disappearance was none other than Willow, the woman he still called Mom. At first, the words didn't make sense to him. His heart pushed against them, trying to rewrite what he was hearing. But the tremble in Michael's voice, the pale look on Sasha's face, the way Amelia had begun to cry without knowing why, it all made the truth undeniable. Willow had done something terrible. And just like that, Wiley's world stopped being a place of warmth and became something cold and unpredictable. He didn't scream or cry. Wiley simply froze, as if time itself had betrayed him. His small fingers clutched Daisy's stuffed animal, left behind in the chaos, as though holding on to it might reverse what had happened. Amelia, sensing her brother's fear, mirrored his silence. The two of them sat on the floor of their playroom for hours that night, wrapped in a quiet too heavy for their young hearts. 4 days. Wiley refused to speak Willow's name. When Michael gently asked him how he was feeling, Wiley just shook his head. "I don't want to talk," he muttered once, his voice dry, brittle. He didn't eat much. He didn't sleep. He stayed curled up next to Amelia, protective and frightened, like the world had suddenly become something sharp and unpredictable. And he didn't know where to step without cutting himself. The realization that Willow had taken Daisy, his baby sister, without permission, without warning, and had tried to hide her, was more than just a disturbing headline. To Wiley, it was a personal betrayal. Willow had read him bedtime stories. She had held his hand when he was scared. She had promised him that families stick together, that even when things are hard, love means never running away. But now she had broken every rule she taught him, and that betrayal carved deep, silent wounds that no amount of comfort from Michael or Sasha could heal. What made the situation even more horrifying was the mounting confusion Wiley experienced. He couldn't understand why someone who loved them would do something so wrong. He asked Sasha in a whisper one night, "Did she stop loving us?" And Sasha, struggling to find words, held back tears and pulled him close. "No," she replied, her voice trembling. "Sometimes people love you in ways that aren't safe." But that only made things harder for Wiley to comprehend. He began to fear love itself. If love could turn into kidnapping, into betrayal, then what could he trust? Who could he believe? The psychological fallout didn't stop there. Wiley began waking up from nightmares, calling out for Daisy, his voice cracked with panic. He refused to be left alone. At school, his teachers noticed he had become withdrawn, distracted. He no longer raised his hand in class. He stopped talking about his family, something he used to do proudly. At home, he began exhibiting obsessive behaviors, checking the locks on doors, counting the steps between his room and Daisy's, needing confirmation over and over again that Amelia was still there, still safe. Sasha and Michael tried everything: therapy sessions, extra hugs, gentle explanations, but nothing could erase the deepening fear that had rooted itself in Wiley's chest. For Amelia, though too young to articulate her emotions, the tension was no less real. She clung to Wiley constantly, sensing his fear and echoing it in her own way: tantrums, sleepless nights, sudden bursts of tears. Her joy had dimmed, and her laughter, once constant, had become rare. Together, the two children moved like shadows through the mansion, tightly bonded by confusion and loss, bound by a trauma that was not their fault but now defined their daily lives. And in all this, the ghost of Willow lingered. Her name was never spoken aloud without tension in the room. Her absence was both a relief and an open wound. Wiley missed the version of Willow he had loved. But he also feared the woman she had become. The whispers of her mental breakdown, of a possible diagnosis, of being sent to Ferncliff rather than prison, all of it meant little to a boy who only understood that someone he trusted had taken his sister and nearly disappeared. That memory was a scar now. Invisible to the eye but impossible to ignore. This isn't just a storyline about a woman's collapse, it is the unraveling of a child's sense of safety. A foundational crack in Wiley's emotional development. The effects will linger for years, shaping how he sees relationships, trust, love, and fear. Every adult around him is scrambling to contain the fallout, but the damage has already been done. Wiley has been introduced to the idea that monsters don't always come with fangs, they can wear the face of someone who once kissed his forehead goodnight. In many ways. Wiley is the heart of General Hospital's current emotional storm. Through his silent breakdown, the audience sees the full consequence of Willow's descent, not just as a character arc, but as a human tragedy that ripples across generations. His pain is quiet but deep, his confusion heartbreaking in its simplicity. He didn't deserve to learn the hard way that sometimes love turns into something terrifying. But now that he is forever changed. Wiley is no longer the innocent boy in the background. He is the child carrying the weight of betrayal too large for his shoulders, and that is perhaps the most haunting twist of all. Wiley had always grown up in a world that, while chaotic and confusing, was kept delicately stitched together by the illusion of safety. Adults argued behind closed doors, secrets passed in whispers, and emotions ran high. But there had always been constants he clung to, rituals, smiles, bedtime stories, and above all, the quiet warmth of Willow's presence. She had been the anchor in the storms. The one who dried his tears when he scraped his knee, the one who reassured him when the noise of grown-up fights threatened to seep into his fragile sense of security. But when the news of Willow's arrest spread through the walls of the Quartermain estate, that illusion collapsed. It wasn't just that she had been arrested, it was that she had taken Daisy, his baby sister, in a moment of desperation that not even the adults could explain without faltering. The first few hours were defined by silence. Wiley had overheard pieces of the conversation. Caught fragments of hushed voices that couldn't hide the gravity of what had happened. He stood still in the hallway, listening, not understanding every word, but feeling their weight. The house no longer felt warm. It felt cold, unfamiliar, unstable. His young heart couldn't process the betrayal in logical terms, but instinctively, he knew that something irreversible had happened. That the person who had once told him monsters weren't real had become a monster in someone else's eyes. And just like that, the safety net that had protected his emotional world vanished. In the days that followed, the signs of emotional unraveling began to appear. Wiley stopped asking about Willow. He avoided the living room, where the adults seemed to be in constant states of tension. He refused to enter Daisy's nursery, even when Sasha coaxed him gently. The trauma was not loud, it was quiet, insidious, and deeply rooted in confusion and loss. He became withdrawn, turning inward, clutching his old stuffed bear tighter than he had in years. He sat on the stairs for long periods, watching people come and go, listening without speaking. He began drawing pictures that were difficult for anyone to look at, images of broken houses, people with no faces, rain that never stopped falling. Each crayon stroke revealed a child who had lost his understanding of who was safe and who was not. Wiley's perception of family began to distort. The boy who once believed in forever was now learning that people could disappear without warning. His questions became more existential in nature. Asked not out of curiosity but out of fear, fear of abandonment, of betrayal, of being forgotten. He wondered if Daisy cried when she was taken. He wondered if Willow still thought about him. And more terrifyingly, he began to wonder if he had done something wrong. Guilt seeped in where love had once been. His nightmares became more frequent, and when he awoke, he wouldn't speak. He would simply sit at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, waiting for the world to feel normal again. The adults tried to help, but even their efforts were fractured by their own emotional collapse. Michael was overwhelmed with rage and grief. Sasha carried the weight of trying to comfort two children while managing her own sense of betrayal. The household was held together by a thread, and Wiley felt it fray with every passing day. He overheard arguments about court hearings and psychological evaluations. He heard Willow's name said with equal parts sorrow and anger. And though no one meant to make him feel like he was in the middle, he felt it anyway. The conflict wasn't outside of him, it was inside him, growing louder each day. His sense of identity was further shaken by how people tiptoed around him. He could feel it in their voices, in the way they stopped speaking when he entered a room. He wasn't just dealing with the loss of a maternal figure, he was absorbing the tension of an entire family unraveling. His daily routines changed. He stopped eating his favorite foods. He no longer played with the toys he once loved. The laughter that once echoed through the halls had been replaced by silence. Interrupted only by murmurs of legal terms he didn't understand but knew were bad. He felt watched, pitted, studied. And yet, no one could give him what he needed most, a sense of normalcy. A sense that the woman he had trusted hadn't just walked into darkness and taken part of him with her. As the weeks passed, Wiley developed compulsive behaviors that no one saw coming. He began double-checking locks, refusing to go to sleep until he was assured the doors were secure. He lined up his toys in perfect rows and grew agitated when anyone touched them. He avoided eye contact, and when asked about his feelings, he responded with mechanical shrugs. It was as if a part of his emotional range had been shut down. What concerned the adults the most wasn't just his silence, but the chilling maturity in his eyes. He no longer looked like a child searching for understanding. He looked like someone who had given up trying. Even Amelia, though much younger, sensed the shift in her brother. She clung to him more than usual, and in return, Wiley tried to protect her in the only way he knew how, by pushing his feelings down and becoming the quiet, steady presence she needed. But that protection came at a cost. He was burying his trauma beneath layers of self-control that no child should ever have to muster. And as the therapists began to diagnose him with early symptoms of emotional detachment and childhood PTSD, the adults were forced to reckon with the long-term consequences of Willow's choices, not just for herself, but for the children she left behind in chaos. What made Wiley's suffering even more tragic was that he had once believed in redemption. He had seen people make mistakes and come back. But this time, the betrayal was too personal, too visceral. Willow had not only taken Daisy, she had taken away the belief that love could be safe. And in doing so, she had condemned her son to a childhood shaped by fear, distrust, and emotional withdrawal. No amount of apologies or therapy sessions could undo that damage. It was done. It was part of him now. Willow's arrest was not merely a scandal or a legal headline, it was an emotional earthquake whose aftershocks would be felt for years, perhaps decades. Wiley was just a child. But he had been forced to carry the weight of betrayal and heartbreak far beyond his years. And as the world moved on, as courtrooms filled and headlines changed, he remained frozen in the moment everything fell apart. A boy sitting at a window, staring into a sky that no longer looked blue, waiting for a mother who would never return the same way again. Willow's world has collapsed under the weight of her own actions, and the consequences are now being felt in a ripple effect that is tearing through every corner of Port Charles. Especially in the lives of the children she once swore to protect. The quiet suburban calm that once defined her days as a mother is now replaced by courtrooms, psychological evaluations, and headlines that paint her as a danger rather than a caregiver. In the aftermath of Daisy's abduction, a crime so steeped in emotional delusion and psychological fracture, Willow is no longer seen as the soft-spoken woman who tried to survive trauma. She is now the cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones, the name children recoil from, and the shadow that haunts Wiley's and Amelia's once innocent dreams. As they begin to understand, in fragments, the truth of what has happened, their innocence is being chipped away. Wiley, now old enough to process emotions beyond mere confusion, has retreated into silence, questioning the very fabric of what family means. For Amelia, the damage is more subtle but no less scarring: sleepless nights, sudden crying spells, an unease that follows her even when she is in Carly's protective arms. The betrayal Wiley feels is not merely about the kidnapping. It is about the foundational collapse of trust between a child and the person they were raised to believe would never hurt them. The realization that Willow is not just absent but dangerous has fractured his sense of identity. He is caught in a painful paradox, mourning a mother who is still alive but no longer safe. Michael, though devastated, is being forced into action, placing his son's emotional survival above all else. He once tried to preserve Willow's dignity in the face of their breakup. But that dignity died the moment she stepped into the Quartermain nursery, lifted Daisy from her crib, and walked out into the night like a phantom chasing a fantasy of motherhood that no longer existed. Now, Michael has become a father on a mission. The grief he feels for what Willow used to be has been replaced with the fierce urgency to protect what remains of his family. Carly has stepped into a maternal role with relentless resolve. For her, this is no longer just about defending Daisy, it is about undoing the emotional damage inflicted on all three children. She knows from her own past what happens when children are raised in a vortex of lies and betrayal. She sees Wiley's eyes, wide, anxious, searching for answers that no child should ever have to demand, and she knows that comfort alone won't be enough. Carly has become both shield and sword, pressing the court to act swiftly and firmly. She's pushed for Daisy to be officially recognized as a victim of emotional endangerment, demanded that Willow receive a full psychological profile, and has refused to allow even supervised visitation until the court determines that Willow is mentally sound, which, given the severity of the case, may never happen. The judge presiding over the case has begun proceedings with caution, recognizing that the emotional volatility of the children must come before any chance of reconciliation. Court-appointed child psychologists have already noted signs of emotional regression in Wiley and rising anxiety markers in Amelia. All evidence points to a household that must now be rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal, with Willow permanently removed from the structure. And yet, the tragedy doesn't stop at the court's edge. In the quiet hours of the night, when Carly cradles Daisy or listens to Wiley cry in his sleep, the weight of the trauma they've all endured becomes more than a legal matter. It becomes a generational scar, etched into the heart of a family that didn't deserve this storm. Meanwhile, Willow sits in clinical silence, stripped of visitation rights, stripped of her dignity, and soon to be stripped of her freedom. Her legal team, once optimistic, now flounders between insanity pleas and last-ditch appeals to sympathy. But the court is not interested in sympathy. The court has seen the footage from the Quartermain security system. They've heard the audio, Willow whispering to Daisy about how Sasha and Michael have stolen everything from her. They've seen the drawings Wiley made after the incident, dark, cryptic sketches of a woman with no face standing over a crib. It's no longer a matter of if Willow will face consequences. It's a matter of how severe, and for how long. The psychiatric narrative being formed around Willow's case is one of dissociative identity disorder, possibly triggered by cumulative trauma and an untreated emotional breakdown after the custody loss. But even with this diagnosis, the debate remains. Is mental illness an excuse for putting a child at risk, or does it underscore just how dangerous she has become? Some argue for Ferncliff, a secure psychiatric facility. Others call for full prison sentencing. But no matter the decision, the real prison for Willow has already been built. It lives in Wiley's silence, Amelia's fear, Michael's rejection, and Carly's defiance. These are the bars she cannot escape. And still, the fallout continues. In the community, whispers have begun. Parents keep their children closer. Teachers have noticed Wiley's withdrawn behavior and increased outbursts of anger. Sasha, once determined to forgive, has broken down repeatedly, unable to fully process how the woman she once trusted tried to steal her child. Every person touched by this saga is now being forced to confront their own sense of what safety and forgiveness mean. And as for Willow, she remains confined, legally, emotionally, and spiritually. No redemption arc can undo what has been done. No apology will ever be enough. The changes sweeping through Port Charles are irreversible. What began as a tragedy has now become a reckoning. Willow's fall from grace has not only cost her a future with her children, it has reshaped the lives of everyone around her. And for Wiley, the child caught in the middle of love and lies. His journey will now forever be split into two chapters, the time before the truth, and the time after he learned what his mother had done. That knowledge, that trauma, will echo for years. And no matter how the court rules, it is that echo, silent, steady, and inescapable, that will define the true punishment for Willow. Willow's devastating downfall is no longer just a possibility, it is now inevitable. The once beloved character, once seen as a symbol of resilience and grace under pressure, is facing the harsh reality of her darkest choices. After weeks of speculation, mounting evidence, and emotional unraveling, Willow will officially be arrested for the abduction of Daisy, marking a final turning point in her tragic arc. What began as subtle instability has now transformed into undeniable criminality. With Port Charles watching in stunned silence as the woman who once fought for justice now finds herself handcuffed, disgraced, and isolated. This harrowing conclusion not only brings Willow's storyline to a devastating close but also signals a major shift for the show itself, as Caitlin McMullen, the actress who brought Willow to life, prepares to exit General Hospital. For viewers who have followed Willow's journey from schoolteacher to mother, to bone marrow transplant survivor, and eventually to a woman fighting to hold her family together, this fall from grace is emotionally staggering. Her slow psychological decline, exacerbated by betrayal, loss, and perceived injustice, pushed her to act out in ways no one could have predicted. When she abducted Daisy, it wasn't just an impulsive act, it was the culmination of months of emotional erosion. Her belief that Daisy rightfully belonged with her, her bitterness toward Sasha, and her inability to accept Michael's rejection combined into a perfect storm of delusion. And now, the consequences are real, and they are permanent. As Willow is taken into custody, the visual is haunting. Gone is the gentle mother cradling her child. In her place stands a woman undone by her own choices, haunted, unrecognizable, and alone. The arrest is not simply the end of a storyline, it is the beginning of a permanent stain on her legacy. The community of Port Charles will never look at her the same way again, and more importantly, neither will her children. Wiley, already emotionally damaged by the truth of his mother's betrayal, may never recover his sense of safety. Amelia, too young to understand, will grow up with stories of a mother she will barely remember, stories told with caution and sorrow, not celebration. Behind the scenes, Caitlin McMullen's departure marks a pivotal moment for General Hospital. Her portrayal of Willow has been praised for its emotional depth and nuance, especially during the character's battles with cancer and custody challenges. Her exit, though long rumored, is now confirmed as the storyline reaches its irreversible climax. Sources close to production have indicated that Willow's arrest will serve as her final on-screen appearance, closing the chapter with dramatic force. The decision to write Willow off in such a tragic way underscores the show's commitment to high-stakes storytelling, even when it involves letting go of a central character. For Caitlin, this is the end of an era. Her exit from GH will leave a void, but it also allows her to pursue new creative endeavors beyond Port Charles. Fans will no doubt mourn the loss, but the power of her performance ensures that Willow's final days will be remembered not just for the crime, but for the complexity of the woman behind it. She didn't fall in one swift motion, she crumbled piece by piece, under the pressure of expectation, rejection, and unresolved pain. As General Hospital moves forward, the aftermath of Willow's arrest will ripple across the canvas. Michael will be forced to redefine what fatherhood looks like without Willow. Carly will continue to be the shield protecting Wiley and Amelia from further emotional harm. Sasha will grapple with the emotional whiplash of nearly losing Daisy, while also confronting the grief of losing someone she once considered family. And the audience will be left to consider the uncomfortable truth that even the kindest souls can break under the weight of unresolved trauma. Willow's final moments in Port Charles are not redemptive, they are raw, unsettling, and unforgettable. Her legacy will be one of both tragedy and warning. And as the curtain falls on Caitlin McMullen's time on General Hospital, the show closes one of its most turbulent chapters, reminding us all that in the world of soap operas, no character is immune to downfall, and no farewell is ever without heartbreak.